Alex, can you talk to us about what you found out when you looked into the Rust accident? And for people who, in case you're just joining or you don't know about this, Rust is the film that Alec Baldwin produced and was in, where there was a fatal shooting of Halyna Hutchins, who was a cinematographer. And, I guess I want to say that, like, my heart goes out to like every relative, every person who's dealing with loss. And this is, getting a lot of attention, understandably. And it is tragic. And now there's a son, a 10-year-old without his mother, and there's a man without a wife who's now widowed. And, all these people lost a friend and a colleague. And there's also things that are happening that are less dramatic, like every day, that are sometimes they're deadly. Some, we see these stories of cab drivers in New York City and suicide. These are just kind of extreme, tragic examples of the corners that are being cut. And I was shocked when I read your article, Alex, about the carelessness, that there had been a shooting with a hot gun, a loaded gun, just days before.
Yeah, I haven't actually seen a ton of information about. There were misfires with the prop gun, which does actually happen fairly frequently on sets, but it was enough. There were several in one day, a few days before, to the point that, yeah, people on the set were sending texts and otherwise sort of communicating that it felt like a completely out of control, unsafe environment. I think the thing here is like, so that shooting happened on October 21st, and very quickly, all of these details came out about the fact that people had been raising the alarm on the safety conditions on this set, that there had been 6 union members who had walked off of the set just that morning, 6 hours before the shooting. They'd been raising concerns for days about not getting paid on time, about, again, this issue of being told they had to drive an hour after a long day to find a place to stay because the production wouldn't provide hotel rooms near the ranch where it was being shot outside of Santa Fe, New Mexico. Things like that, on and on. And the irony, of course, is that Alec Baldwin had actually had made a video in support of IATSE, saying producers don't give a fuck about your life, just days before this happened. And in fact, it was in the comments on Facebook that one of the people on the set had said, hey, by the way, did you know I'm literally on this guy's movie right now and we aren't getting paid and we're not getting enough sleep. My coworker slept in his car on Sunday instead of having to drive an hour home. So in it, all of which is to say, was incredibly predictable, right? It's very unusual in the film world for 6 crew members to walk off rather than stay. This work is so sort of precarious as it is that people do not want to lose gigs once they have them. And meanwhile, these people are also stranded in the middle of nowhere in New Mexico. To feel that you have to walk off the set and leave your job in that environment does suggest that things were very bad. And actually, it did come out that the line producer, since I wrote that article, it's come out that the line producer on that movie had actually had an unfair labor practice charge filed against him with the NLRB on a previous set because he had fired workers for raising concerns around safety conditions and who had tried to unionize, go union on that set for reasons like being asked to hold an 80-pound object above an actress's head in a shoot with no safety cable. So, I spoke to someone who had worked with the guy in charge of safety on the set, assistant director. That's the person usually overseeing the safety conditions, despite that title, assistant. And that guy's nickname, according to this person on a previous production, was Safety Last. So that is how bad things were. And again, all of this kind of comes back to how the producers are empowered in this industry. There's really no sense that they need to adhere to any kind of standards, right? They can hire the cheapest people. So the armorer on the set was 24 years old and had very little experience, but presumably, she came cheaper than more experienced armorers. And again, especially with low budget films like this, that is the priority and everything else is secondary. And so, Alec Baldwin's comment in his video that they don't give a fuck about you is very much proven in this situation. And again, it's a tragedy because there's a gun involved. So it led to a death immediately, which is horrible and, is being investigated. But again, everyone I spoke to in this industry said, this is very similar to dying in a car crash after a long day. This is about not being valued as workers who produce, skilled labor that deserve to be compensated fairly for it.
Yeah, I just wanted to actually share the comments from the person who was working on the film, Lane Looper. Lane Looper wrote in response to Alec Baldwin statement in solidarity with IATSE, international. Well, it's the theater.
Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees. So it's the below the line workers, right? The people who aren't sort of big shot names, but do a lot of the manual labor or costume or hair, craft services, all of that stuff on sets.
Okay. So Lane Looper responded to Alec Baldwin's video saying, I'm literally on the show in New Mexico with him, and the producers on that movie are treating the local crew like fucking dog shit, absolute dog shit. At the moment, I'm fighting to get my crew on this movie hotel rooms when we go long or too tired to drive the hour back from location to Albuquerque, because as Alex said, they were not putting them up close by to save costs. They were sending them from Santa Fe to Albuquerque. They either say no or offer a garbage roadside motel that's used as a homeless shelter. In fact, the line producer on the flick complained the motel she booked charges her $10 more per night than the homeless. They haven't even paid the crew a proper check. My B-second had to sleep in his fucking car on Sunday night because they won't give him a room, and he was too tired to drive the hour home. Nobody on any production should have to sleep in the cold in their car at base camp to not die driving home. Already have called my BA and he's fully involved. The show keeps arguing they don't have to do anything because contract minimums don't force them to. In fact, in the low budget agreement, a hotel doesn't need to be provided until 14 hours worked. And this show's doing hour lunches, so it requires a 15-hour elapsed day before they will volunteer a hotel. So here's where my crew's at with this show, and the union's involved. 12.5 hour days worked with an hour lunch, 2 hours of driving a day, leaving exactly 8 hours of time not at work. Most folks on my show are getting 5 hours of sleep a night. So, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, like a nightmare from start to finish, and also exactly what, I mean, I wrote about this situation because it was exactly what people have been talking about in IATSE for months as they negotiate this contract, that, you know, they voted to authorize a strike overwhelmingly, almost 99%. So that would have been 60,000 people. So these members have, and part of the urgency, what those members have been talking about is this exact thing, right? The hours worked that he mentions, having turnaround times that only require, 8 hours from when you leave set to when you have to be back, or 9 hours, not including sometimes the commute. And so it's the exact same thing, right? And the fact that it even came up in those Facebook comments pointed to this insufficiency of the existing standards, right? Which is part of what the members who are still unhappy with the tentative agreement are talking about. They're saying, we've already had these standards where we get 10 hours of turnaround, 10 hours from being on set to, going home and coming back. And it's still dangerous, that it's not enough time. It allows us to be worked as long as we possibly can. And then we have to commute. We don't get to see our family, so on and so forth. And so it's still the exact same conversation that's going on. And so I think part of when people are thinking about like who exactly is responsible for this tragedy, at some level, it is the existing standards that empower producers to work people this much. You could have the most talented armorer or assistant director that you want. If people are getting 5 hours of sleep a night, a mistake is going to happen. It doesn't matter how good someone is at their job.
Right. So it's inevitable. And that's why, as you put it, this was not a random accident.
Yeah, I was quoting someone.
Right. Yes.
Yeah, I was quoting a worker, and every worker I spoke to basically said exactly that. That, so many levels of safety had to be ignored in this specific incident, dealing with guns that had actual rounds in them, that weren't checked, that were just handed to an actor by the wrong person, so on and so forth. It was very clear that this was just a shoddy, kind of tragic, horrible workplace situation, and that's what happens in such environments.